Welcome to Retail's Hall of Delusion. 69 complaints so unhinged they make customer service sound like paranormal defense. From "your breath failed quality control" to "please retune the barcode beep," we're unwrapping the most fragile egos ever to meet a checkout lane. Short, sharp, ridiculous. Let's scan the madness. 1. A woman at a grocery store filed a formal complaint against a cashier for not being a psychic. Apparently, this cashier committed the ultimate sin. He failed to telepathically sense that she had a digital coupon on her phone, which she never mentioned or showed him. Her official grievance stated that his lack of foresight caused her significant emotional and financial distress. She demanded a full apology and for the store to invest in mandatory telepathy training for all checkout staff to prevent such cosmic injustices from ever happening again. 2. In a department store, a customer service manager was baffled by a complaint against a new, very cheerful employee. The customer, a stern-looking man in his 50s, claimed the cashier's smile was unsettlingly aggressive. He wrote that her constant wide grin felt less like a welcome and more like a threat, describing it as her baring her teeth like a wolf sizing up its prey. He requested that she be coached on how to project a more subdued and emotionally appropriate level of corporate-mandated happiness, because her current approach was just too intense. 3. One shopper at a big-box store decided the checkout process was a personal auditory assault. He complained to management that the beep of the item scanner at Register 4 was, and I quote, agonizingly off-key. He claimed the sound was a C-sharp when it should have been a perfect C, and this dissonance was ruining his entire shopping experience. He wasn't asking for it to be quieter. He was demanding a technician come out and recalibrate the tonal frequency of the scanner to be more musically harmonious with the store's ambient noise. 4. A customer meticulously watched a teenage clerk bag her groceries and then stormed over to the manager's office. Her complaint wasn't that her bread was crushed, but that the clerk had almost put a can of beans on top of it before correcting himself. She insisted that this brief moment of gravitational defiance demonstrated a fundamental lack of respect for the laws of physics and the sanctity of baked goods. She demanded the employee be retrained in basic physics, specifically gravitational theory, before ever being allowed to handle her delicate loaf of sourdough again. 5. Most people complain about slow service, but one man at a gas station convenience store did the opposite. He complained that the clerk was too efficient. The cashier scanned his items, took his payment, and had him out the door in under 30 seconds. The customer's complaint stated that this robotic efficiency felt impersonal and rushed, depriving him of the cherished human connection of the retail transaction. He felt he wasn't given adequate time to bask in the purchasing experience of his soda and bag of chips. 6. This one is just bizarre. A woman at a pharmacy complained that the cashier was, get this, breathing wrong. She didn't say it was too loud or that he had bad breath. She claimed he was exhaling air that was clearly not up to company standards, and that it was creating a low-quality oxygen zone around the register. Her proposed solution was for management to install a personal air filtration system for that specific employee, or, failing that, teach him how to breathe in a way that was more conducive to a pleasant retail environment. 7. A man buying avocados tried to make a joke to the cashier, something about the price being guac-ward. When the young cashier simply offered a polite, non-committal smile and continued scanning, the man became deeply offended. He later emailed a complaint, accusing the employee of having no appreciation for high-level wordplay and fostering a hostile and creatively stifling environment. He suggested that as part of their job, cashiers should be required to at least pretend to laugh at all customer jokes, no matter how bad they are. 8. A shopper in a home improvement store lodged a complaint against a clerk because of the color of her uniform. The store's vests were a bright lime green. The customer wrote that this specific shade of green clashed violently with her personal aura and caused her to feel spiritually unbalanced every time she had to check out. She wasn't asking for an exception. She was demanding the entire corporation change its branding to a more spiritually neutral color palette, like beige or a gentle taupe, to accommodate her sensitivities. 9. A woman insisted the cashier's loyalty card scanner was skimming her memories. not her data, her memories. She claimed every beep felt like a tiny download of her childhood and demanded the store wipe the device and return her recollection of third-grade field day. 10. A woman paying for a $3 item with a $20 bill created a scene at the checkout. The cashier gave her a $10 bill, a 5, and 2 ones as change. The woman filed an official complaint because she had, in her mind, non-verbally requested her change in 17 individual $1 bills. She claimed the cashier's refusal to provide this specific denomination was a clear sign he was hoarding small bills as part of a larger financial conspiracy to devalue her purchasing power. 11. A customer at a large hardware store complained that the cashier handed him his receipt vertically instead of horizontally. In his formal written statement, he argued that a horizontal handoff is the universally accepted business standard, and that the cashier's vertical presentation was a subtle but clear passive-aggressive power move designed to undermine his authority as a consumer. He demanded that the employee receive immediate remedial training in proper receipt ergonomics to prevent future incidents. 12. A woman complained that a clerk in a high-end clothing store was excessively stationary. She found his ability to stand perfectly still while she browsed a nearby rack to be both unnatural and intimidating. Her complaint described him as a sentient mannequin, whose unwavering stillness made her feel like she was being silently judged for her fashion choices. She suggested he be instructed to fidget or sway slightly from time to time, just to appear more human and less predatory. 13. At a supermarket, a manager was pulled aside to address a complaint about a cashier named Kevin. The problem wasn't Kevin's service, but the font on his name tag. The customer, a graphic designer, insisted the serif font used for the name was pretentious and condescending. He argued that a simple, humble, sans serif font like Helvetica would be far more appropriate for a grocery store environment, as the fancy font suggested Kevin thought he was better than the people buying milk and eggs from him. 14. A man purchasing 3 family-sized bags of cheese puffs and a gallon of ice cream complained that the cashier looked at his items and then made direct eye contact for a full, uninterrupted 2 seconds. He interpreted this silent glance as a wave of condescending nutritional judgment and a violation of his junk food privacy. He demanded an apology for the cashier's judgmental eyeballs and suggested that staff be trained to look only at the barcodes, never at the products themselves. 15. A customer at a bookstore complained that when she asked a clerk where to find a specific self-help book, the clerk let out a small sigh before answering. The customer was convinced this wasn't a sigh of fatigue, but a deeply philosophical sigh of existential despair, triggered by her book choice. She wrote that the employee's audible existential crisis made her question her own life choices and completely ruined the therapeutic potential of her purchase before she even made it. 16. After a customer's card was declined, the cashier politely suggested he try inserting it again. The customer became irate and filed a complaint, accusing the cashier of aggressively tapping the screen on his side of the terminal. He claimed these taps were not random, but a deliberate attempt to send disruptive electronic vibrations through the machine to sabotage his chip. He was convinced the cashier was secretly in the employ of his credit card company, sent to publicly shame him for his financial situation. 17. In a bizarre twist on the usual complaints, a shopper reported that a store clerk smelled unrealistically pleasant. She described the scent not as perfume, but as a fresh laundry smell that was so perfect it had to be synthetic and deceptive. She argued that this impossibly clean scent set an unattainable standard of hygiene that made her, the customer, feel insecure and inferior. She recommended the store use a more natural, slightly flawed human scent for its staff to promote inclusivity. 18. A man at a convenience store complained that the clerk opened his plastic bag with too much unnecessary flair. He said the cashier snapped the bag open with a sharp flick of the wrist, a move he described in his complaint as egotistical showboating that was inappropriate for a professional retail environment. The customer felt this flashy bag-opening technique was a way for the employee to mock his simple purchase of a single can of soup and demanded all bags be opened in a more humble manner. 19. A man complained the cashier didn't properly narrate the transaction. He wanted play-by-play commentary, scanning, bagging, breathtaking coin placement, to feel seen as a protagonist. Silent competence, he wrote, reduced me to an extra in my own purchase. He requested ESPN-level checkout announcing. 20. A customer paying in cash lodged a formal complaint detailing how the cashier returned his change. The cashier had placed the coins on top of the bills in her hand before giving them to him. He argued this method was disrespectful, as it forced him to perform a clumsy, two-handed sorting maneuver at the counter. He called it a fundamental breakdown of transactional etiquette, and even submitted a hand-drawn diagram to the manager illustrating the correct, two-step process for returning change. 21. A woman who was in the process of moving to a different state complained that as she was leaving, the cashier cheerfully said, "See you again soon." She took this not as a polite pleasantry, but as a deliberately malicious curse, intended to make her move fail. In her complaint, she accused the employee of practicing retail witchcraft and attempting to trap her in the city through the power of negative prophetic suggestion. She demanded the store officially retract the statement to nullify the hex. 22. This one is about the little plastic divider bar on the checkout conveyor belt. The customer in front hadn't finished unloading her cart, but the person behind her placed the divider down. The first customer filed a complaint against the cashier for failing to properly police the conveyor belt's demilitarized zone. She claimed the premature placement of the bar was an act of passive-aggressive territorialism, and the cashier, by doing nothing, was complicit in creating a hostile checkout environment. 23. A man became incensed when a cashier at a busy pharmacy called out, "Can I help? Who's next?" He insisted in his complaint that her emphasis on the word help was a targeted insult. He was convinced she was questioning his ability to stand in line correctly, implying he looked lost and incompetent. He accused her of grammatical condescension and suggested she be retrained to use the phrase, "I can assist the next customer," which he felt carried a less judgmental tone. 24. A shopper demanded a refund because the teenage clerk couldn't explain why the store's basil looked sad under fluorescent lighting. He wanted a full lecture on photosynthesis, lumen output, and chloroplast morale. When offered a manager, he refused. "No, I need a plant biologist at Register 3. 25. A cashier asked a customer for his phone number to look up his loyalty account. The customer gave it, but then watched the cashier's fingers intently as he typed it in. Later, he filed a security complaint alleging that the cashier possessed a predatory and unnatural memory, and had clearly memorized his number for nefarious purposes. He demanded that management force the employee to forget his number, possibly through hypnosis, to protect his personal data from this human supercomputer. 26. A woman at a discount store complained that the cashier had a small, well-tended succulent plant sitting next to her register. She found this to be emotionally manipulative. Her reasoning was that the plant's quiet, resilient presence was a form of passive-aggressive judgment designed to make customers feel bad about their own life choices and their inability to keep plants alive. She called it an unsolicited botanical guilt trip and demanded the judgmental succulent be removed from public view. 27. During a winter cold snap, a customer complained that the cashier working nearest the automatic doors was hoarding the store's warmth. He claimed that the employee had created a personal microclimate behind the register and was deliberately projecting cold air towards the customers by refusing to share his hoarded thermal energy. He wasn't asking for the store to be warmer. He was asking for that specific cashier to be reprimanded for unfair heat distribution. 28. One customer submitted a formal complaint against a female cashier because of her slightly chipped nail polish. The complainant stated that the chipped polish was a clear and troubling indicator of a chaotic and unreliable personality. She was genuinely concerned that this inattention to personal detail would directly translate into professional incompetence, and she lived in fear that the cashier might chaotically miscalculate her change or forget to scan a coupon due to the state of her manicure. 29. A man with a booming voice complained that a male cashier's voice was too deep and authoritative. He wrote that when the cashier stated his total of $31.16, it sounded less like a price and more like a judicial sentence being handed down from a high court. The experience was so intimidating that he requested the store only schedule cashiers with less constitutionally significant vocal ranges during his preferred shopping hours to avoid future anxiety. 30. A shopper lodged a complaint against a clerk for organizing the candy display at the checkout lane. The problem? The clerk was sorting them by color, creating a rainbow effect. The customer found this forced and unnatural color gradient to be stressful and aesthetically displeasing. She argued that candies should be grouped by brand and type, not by their position in the visible light spectrum, accusing the clerk of prioritizing whimsical visuals over logical product categorization. 31. A woman buying a single carton of yogurt complained after the cashier asked if she needed a bag. She interpreted this simple question as a profound and insulting judgment on her physical strength. Her complaint stated that the cashier was publicly questioning her load-bearing capabilities and insinuating she was too weak to carry a small item. She felt the offer of a bag was not a courtesy but an unsolicited and condescending assessment of her muscular and skeletal integrity. 32. One customer with self-diagnosed hypersensitive hearing filed a noise complaint against a cashier for handling money too aggressively. He claimed the sound of the brand-new crisp $20 bills crinkling as she counted them was aurally jarring and excessively percussive. He requested that the store either use older, softer bills to create a more gentle soundscape or train the staff in a low-impact, stealth-based cash handling technique to accommodate his auditory sensitivities. 33. A customer became deeply suspicious while watching a cashier neatly straighten each bill before placing it in the cash drawer. He later told the manager he was certain this wasn't just tidiness, but a secret ritual. He theorized the cashier was meticulously aligning the all-seeing eye on the dollar bills to channel Masonic energy and manipulate the store's financial chai. He demanded an investigation into the store's potential ties to secret societies that were being communicated through cash register procedures. 34. A customer at a pharmacy filed a complaint against a cashier named Joy, citing false advertising. The customer's grievance was that while the cashier was perfectly efficient and polite, she did not display a level of active, radiant glee that her name implied. The complaint argued that by having the name Joy, the employee was contractually obligated to be visibly joyous at all times, and her calm, professional demeanor was a breach of the emotional promise made by her name tag. 35. A particularly short customer complained that a very tall cashier was using his vertical advantage to establish dominance during the transaction. He claimed the employee was deliberately looming over the counter to make him feel small and insignificant, turning a simple purchase into a humiliating power dynamic. His suggested solution was for the store to provide the cashier with a shorter stool to sit on, effectively leveling the psychological playing field for all customers. 36. This is next-level germophobia. A woman complained about the way a cashier handed back her credit card. The cashier held it carefully by the edges, a common practice to avoid smudging the chip or strip. The customer, however, saw this as an insult, claiming the cashier was treating her card as if it were a filthy, contaminated object. She wrote that this clinical, fingertip-only handling made her feel like her personal finances were being treated with biological disdain. 37. A cashier, trying to make small talk, complimented a man on the vintage band logo on his t-shirt. The man stared at him blankly, completed his purchase, and then immediately complained to customer service. He accused the employee of conducting unsolicited market research under the guise of a compliment. He was convinced the cashier was a corporate data miner, logging his musical taste to build a psychological profile for targeted advertising. 38. A shopper purchasing a very expensive bottle of wine complained about the cashier's silence. After ringing up the item and stating the high price, the cashier simply paused and waited for payment. The customer found this pause to be incredibly loud and judgmental. He wrote that the cashier was weaponizing silence to let the exorbitant price hang in the air, making him feel ashamed of his own luxurious purchase. He felt the cashier should have immediately said something distracting to ease his spending guilt. 39. A customer claimed the conveyor belt leaned politically. It moved left, then right, then paused. Proof, he said, of biased grocery transport. He demanded a neutral belt that advances goods down the center without agenda, plus an audit of all lanes for ideological tilt. 40. When a cashier asked the standard question, paper or plastic. A customer stared at him for a long moment before asking for the manager. His complaint was that this simple choice placed an immense and undue moral burden upon him. He argued that forcing him to make a snap decision about the environment in a public setting was a form of eco-shaming, and that the store should make the decision for him to spare him the crippling weight of his consumer conscience. 41. While shopping for chips, a customer overheard a young stock clerk humming a sad, slow song as he organized the shelves. He filed a complaint claiming the clerk's melancholy humming was contaminating the snack aisle with an aura of despair. He wrote that the sad tune was actively discouraging impulse buys and that the store should enforce an upbeat major key only humming policy for all employees to maintain a proper atmosphere of consumer enthusiasm. 42. A woman buying vitamins asked which supplements matched her aura spectrum. When the 19-year-old cashier shrugged, she filed a complaint for energy illiteracy, insisting staff be trained to read chakras at the register and prescribe magnesium only if her solar plexus permits. 43. A cashier let out a sudden, powerful sneeze. He immediately covered his mouth with his elbow and used hand sanitizer. A customer standing 2 people back in line still complained. His issue wasn't with hygiene, but with the sneeze's excessive force and explosive acoustics. He claimed the sneeze was so violent it momentarily disturbed the store's air pressure, causing his ears to pop and creating a shockwave of general unease that rippled through the checkout line. 44. A man with an eye for detail complained that his cashier's name tag was tilted at a slight 5-degree angle. He didn't just mention it, he filed a 2-page report. In it, he argued that this blatant disregard for vertical alignment was a sign of systemic carelessness and reflected a deep structural instability within the entire corporate hierarchy. He claimed his confidence in the brand was shattered by that single crooked name tag. 45. A customer filed a complaint against a cashier for appearing too happily married. The employee had a simple wedding band and a small photo of his spouse tucked by his monitor. The complainant, who was single, wrote that this overt display of domestic bliss was unprofessional and created an exclusionary atmosphere that made her feel judged for her own relationship status. She suggested a store policy limiting personal items to things that were more emotionally neutral. 46. A shopper became utterly convinced that the small red light of the barcode scanner was not just for reading prices. He insisted to the store manager that it was a high-resolution retinal scanner, secretly harvesting customers' biometric data. He accused the cashier of being complicit in a massive corporate conspiracy to build a secret database of shopper eyeballs, all under the guise of selling him a half-gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. 47. A high-energy, frantic woman complained that her cashier was disruptively calm. She described his slow, deliberate movements and peaceful demeanor as being completely out of sync with her own frenzied shopping urgency. She felt his zen-like state was a form of passive aggression designed to mock her stress. Her official request was for him to pick up the pace and project a level of anxiety that is more appropriate for a busy retail environment. 48. After completing a transaction, the cashier said, "Have a nice day," just as the receipt began printing, not after it was in the customer's hand. This timing was a critical error, according to the customer's complaint. He argued that the premature well-wishing demonstrated a clear lack of emotional commitment to the sentiment, turning a polite gesture into an empty, robotic formality. He was offended by the cashier's haste to move on to the next person. 49. A customer paying with a personal check complained that the cashier's pen was intimidatingly luxurious. It was a sleek, silver fountain pen. The customer felt that the employee's fancy writing instrument was a deliberate attempt to establish intellectual and financial superiority over him and his cheap, disposable ballpoint pen. He called it an act of stationery-based condescension and suggested the store provide all cashiers with standard, non-threatening pens. 50. A clearance toy rang up wrong, so the cashier checked the price. The customer exploded. "If you really worked here, you'd know every SKU ever printed." She demanded a test where the employee identifies any item's price from a blurry photo, like a human barcode. 51. A cashier saw an elderly customer struggling with a heavy bag of dog food and kindly came around the counter to lift it into her cart. Another customer witnessed this and complained about blatant and unfair preferential treatment. He argued that this act of kindness was discriminatory against the young and able-bodied, and that, to be fair, the cashier should have also offered to carry his single, very light bag of potato chips to his car for him. 52. A tourist from another country received a $2 bill as part of his change. He immediately demanded to see a manager, complaining that the cashier was trying to scam him with a financial prank. He refused to believe the $2 bill was real, calling it obvious play money and a novelty item unfit for serious commerce. He insisted on receiving his change in what he termed legitimate non-collector's item currency, like 2 separate $1 bills. 53. 2 cashiers said, "Bless you," within 10 seconds of a sneeze. A man reported a coordinated courtesy operation, alleging synchronized politeness to distract customers during price hikes. He wanted footage reviewed for excessive manners and a cap on compliments per lane. 54. A shopper complained that the shadow cast by a particularly animated cashier was shaped aggressively. As the cashier moved his arms to scan and bag items, the customer felt the resulting shadow on the counter was menacing and unpredictable, falling upon his groceries in a way that he perceived as hostile. He suggested the store adjust the overhead lighting to create softer, less confrontational shadows for a more tranquil checkout experience. 55. A customer was gathering his bags when the cashier gestured helpfully towards the exit and said, "The exit is right over there, sir." The customer took this as a grave insult. He complained that the cashier was presumptuously ejecting him from the store and foreclosing on his future purchasing potential. What if he had suddenly remembered he needed something else? The gesture, he claimed, made him feel unwelcome to continue shopping. 56. A visibly grumpy and stressed-out customer was met by an unfailingly cheerful and polite cashier. This was unacceptable. The customer later complained that the cashier's positive attitude was emotionally tone-deaf and showed a callous disregard for her palpable distress. She argued that a truly empathetic employee would have mirrored her misery instead of assaulting her with relentless, inappropriate pleasantness, making her feel even worse about her bad day. 57. A customer at a pet store purchasing a single goldfish complained that the teenage clerk's hairstyle, a bright pink mohawk, was biologically confusing for the fish. He argued that the unnatural hair color would be the last thing his new pet saw before being bagged, potentially causing permanent psychological trauma and setting the fish up for a life of anxiety in its new home. 58. After paying, a customer meticulously watched the cashier place his $100 bill into the cash drawer. He then complained that the cashier didn't show the bill the proper respect. He claimed the employee just casually placed it in the slot, whereas a bill of that value deserved to be handled with reverence, smoothed out, and laid to rest with a certain degree of ceremony, acknowledging its financial gravitas. 59. One shopper at a grocery store complained that the cashier's glasses were excessively reflective. She claimed that the glare from the overhead lights on his lenses was not just a random occurrence, but a deliberate interrogation tactic designed to disorient her and prevent her from noticing any potential scanning errors. She demanded he be fitted with anti-glare lenses immediately for the sake of consumer transparency. 60. A woman complained that a cashier's single, subtle ear piercing was distractingly asymmetrical. She stated in her report that since he only had one ear pierced, it created a sense of visual imbalance that made her feel physically uneasy. She suggested that, for the sake of aesthetic harmony and customer comfort, the store should enforce a policy requiring employees to either have both ears pierced or none at all. 61. A customer buying a large quantity of items watched as the cashier began preemptively scanning the next few items while the previous one was still traveling down the belt. This efficiency was seen as an act of aggression. The customer complained that the cashier was rushing the transaction's natural rhythm and disrespecting the personal space of each individual grocery item by not giving it a moment to rest before the next one was scanned. 62. When asked for a donation to a local children's charity at the register, a customer politely declined. He then complained that the cashier's resulting facial expression was insufficiently disappointed. He felt that his refusal should have been met with a look of at least mild theatrical sadness to validate the importance of the cause. Instead, the cashier's quick professional acceptance felt like she didn't even care about the charity in the first place. 63. A customer buying a pack of batteries complained that the clerk who retrieved them from a locked case was too stealthy. He described the employee's movements as silent and ninja-like, which he found unsettling. He argued that a retail employee should make a reasonable amount of noise while walking, a footstep shuffle, a slight jingle of keys, to avoid startling customers by appearing suddenly and without auditory warning. 64. A man at a deli counter complained that the clerk who sliced his turkey used a tone of voice that was incongruent with the meat's quality. He insisted that the premium, oven-roasted turkey demanded a more sophisticated and respectful vocal delivery when asking how thick he wanted his slices. The clerk's casual, friendly tone was, in his opinion, better suited for slicing something far more common, like bologna. 65. A woman became offended when the cashier, in an attempt to be helpful, used her pen to point at the total on the screen. She complained that this was a grossly condescending gesture, akin to a teacher pointing out a mistake to a child. She insisted that an adult consumer should be trusted to locate the total on the screen without having it aggressively highlighted for them, as if they were incapable of basic observation. 66. A customer observed a cashier taking a quick sip of water from her personal water bottle between transactions. He immediately complained to management that this was unprofessional. His reasoning was that he was now forced to think about the cashier's mortality and basic biological needs, which shattered the illusion of a seamless corporate retail machine. He felt her brief act of hydration had ruined the magic of the consumer experience. 67. One shopper complained about the way the cashier handed him his pile of coupons back after scanning them. The cashier had fanned them out like a deck of cards. The customer interpreted this not as a neat gesture, but as a sarcastic and showy display of his own frugality. He felt the cashier was mocking the number of coupons he used and turning his savings into a Vegas-style spectacle for everyone in line to see. 68. A customer paid with exact change down to the last penny. The cashier counted it and said, "Perfect, thank you." The customer complained that the use of the word perfect was patronizing. He wrote that it sounded like the cashier was surprised that he, the customer, possessed the basic mathematical skills to count his own money. And he found the pat on the head, praise for his monetary competence, to be deeply insulting. 69. This one is a masterpiece. A customer filed a complaint arguing that the cashier's entire checkout process, from the initial greeting to the final thank you, was artistically bankrupt. He described the transaction as a soulless, paint-by-numbers performance completely devoid of any creative passion or theatrical risk. He believed a truly exceptional checkout should be a memorable experience, and this cashier's predictable and passionless execution simply wasn't art. Tour's over. Your move. Which complaint should be a lifetime ban from every store? And what's the most unhinged gripe you've witnessed? Quote it, word for word. I'm picking a winner in the comments. Like if you've survived retail, subscribe if you enjoy watching it burn, and tap the bell for the next meltdown.